Hi students, today we're going to talk about Chapter 6, Business-to-Business Markets, How and Why Organizations Buy. There are a lot of similarities between Chapter 5 and 6 in terms of how consumers buy and how businesses buy, so you should see that the chapters are set up quite similarly. There are some differences in the B2B market as well. Some of those would be, number one, that you're usually dealing with multiple buyers as opposed to individuals. And if you've ever tried to take a group of friends out to dinner and find a restaurant that everyone agrees on, then you'll know that when you're dealing with multiple people, the situation becomes more complicated and it's more time consuming. And that is also the case in B2B sales. You're typically dealing with fewer organizations that are more geographically spread out, and the dollar amounts are much larger. So actually more sales actually occur in the B2B market than in what we call the D2C. But typically it's easier to explain marketing concepts to students because we're all individual consumers, and so it's easier to explain concepts that way, but actually more sales happen in the B2B market. The other concept that I wanted to just kind of briefly go over with you are the 4 different types of business demand. The first being derived demand. Your textbook uses the example of changes in demand for education. So for example, if there was a decrease in college enrollment, it would be expected that that would also lead to a decrease in textbook sales. But what we might not think about is then that would also lead to a decrease in the demand for paper, in the demand for pulp and forestry products. So it's really important for those types of firms to pay attention to changes in demand in education and this kind of thing, because it will have a ripple effect, or the demand will fluctuate for those industries as well. The second type of demand that we look at is inelastic demand. And this basically deals with the idea that even though prices change, in some categories of products, the demand will not change because the product is simply needed, and we just don't have the liberty to adjust our purchasing of the product. In terms of individual consumers, gas would be a great example. Right? No matter what the price of gas is, in many cases I don't have a choice. I have to go to work and I have to buy the gas, so I complain a lot, but I still make the purchase. The same for firms. For example, if component parts of cars, or if tires go up, car companies still have to buy the tires. They don't get to, well, just forget it, we're just not going to have any tires on our car, right? You still have to make those purchases. So that would be inelastic demand, right? So firms need to pay attention to what types of products that they have that have an inelastic demand, right? So that they'll know if they're at liberty to be able to change their prices. Right, there's also fluctuating demand. Fluctuating demand is very similar to the example I just gave in terms of derived, but it's basically the idea that small changes in consumer demand create big ripple effects in B2B sales, and so that firms have to pay attention. The final type of demand is joint demand, and this is where you use, there are 2 or more products that we use to make a product together. We can go as simple as peanut butter and jelly. I think a year ago there was a major recall of peanut butter, and that certainly had an impact on jelly sales. Now, there are other products that don't necessarily use those 2 things together, but we certainly have to pay attention. All right, in another example, Ford used Firestone tires, and then Firestone had a major recall. They had lots of problems with their tires. Those products go together, so both of their sales were impacted. So it's also very important that we monitor who we engage in relationships with and what's happening with other joint products, because our successes and failures are kind of tied together, if you will. Those are just a few important concepts here. You'll also see that later in the chapter there's a lot of discussion of the different types of roles individuals can play in B2B sales and in their decision-making process, and how that complicates things. I would pay special attention to those for this chapter as well.